to maintain good health and well-being.
We act for the SDGs by coming together to have a voice so that our issues can be represented in national policy development.
Okay, so I'm not gonna take this because the audio is kind of low, so we'll wait until the actual press conference and
by implementing
the post
sustainable
COP
agricultural practices such as hydroponics,
announcement
cover,
start. So
orchard farming, and all
I'll
those
just take you
things that
back to
you've
the
seen
music in the
outside.
meantime. I'm not really pleased with the audio here.
Turning off all the lights.
Did it. Circumstances push me to the limit. Put me to the already tell what one dance can. Baby, let's shine. You need me to put my hands around your waist. It won't be no other way. Don't have to understand me. I know you will be okay. Let me have this moment of your time. For sure, I'll make you mine. You need to be shining up the time of our life.
To save it. It is going to be hard, but humanity has done hard things before.
إنه ليس مستحيلا.
人类是命运共同体。
The fight against climate change will unite the world as one family.
We have the collective capacity to transform.
It's an opportunity for everyone.
Did it. Circumstances push me to the limit. Put me to the already tell what one dance can. Baby, let's shine. You need me to put my hands around your waist. It won't be no other way. Don't have to understand me. I know you will be okay. Let me have this moment of your time. For sure, I'll make you mine. You need to be shining up the time of our life.
Health and human resource management and
wanna hold your body.
Minister of Foreign Affairs, Economic Development, International Trade, Investment, Industry and Commerce, Honorable Connis Maynard, Minister of Information, Communications and Technology, Posts, Public Infrastructure, Energy and Utilities and Transport, Senator the Honorable Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, government officials, members of the media, listening and viewing audience, good morning. I'd like you to stand wherever you are for the playing of the national anthem. Thank you. Remain standing for, as I invite the Honorable Iselin Phillip to invoke God's presence with a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this day. Into your hands we commend ourselves, and I pray that you provide us with blessings throughout this day until its close. Please bless the discussions and the presentations that will be delivered today. Keep us all safe and under your care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Honorable Phillip. Kindly take a seat. Good morning once more, and welcome to this morning's press conference that will focus on the 28th meeting of the Conference of Parties, more commonly known as COP 28, which began on the 30th of November and concludes today, December 12th, in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. This working trip not only included the 4 ministers before you, but also a technical team, as well as a youth faction. To our in-house guests, we crave your cooperation and we ask that you switch your phones to silent mode. Allow me to introduce the head table. From my immediate right, the Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew, Minister of Finance, et al. Senior Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, Minister of Foreign Affairs, et al. Honorable Conway Maynard, Minister of Energy, et al., and the Honorable Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Environment, Climate Action, et al. Tricia King, the St. Kitts Nevis Youth Voice, who is supported by the Global Fund for Women, and Josiah Burkett, who is a Senior Geographical Information Systems Officer in the Ministry of Sustainable Development. The purpose of the press conference is for the ministers and the members present to update you on their specific task at COP28, the main outcomes and the most significant takeaways. For the benefit of persons who may not know what COP is all about, it is a very critical stage where issues relating to climate change are tabled, as COP is regarded as the largest stage for world leaders, government officials, and climate activists to deliver action on a range of issues that are critical to tackling the climate emergency globally. I now invite the Prime Minister, who is also the head of the national delegation, to give opening statement.
Good morning, Madam Master of Ceremonies. I want to thank you very much for your kind introduction. Let me, of course, take the opportunity to recognize the head table as well. To my right, the Senior Minister, the Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, Minister Honorable Conway Maynard, Honorable Dr. Joel Clark, and of course, the 2 others who were mentioned earlier. I'll get their names correct. But I want to invite, of course, the media and to invite all those who are here in person, but also to invite and to thank our citizens who are listening, as this is most critically important. You have delved into it, but I want to say to our people that this team went to COP 28. And as it was said, it's a conference of parties. And this is the 28th time, of course, but the conference of parties to what? So the COP is the supreme decision-making body of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. It's an international treaty to address climate change. The treaty effectively includes every nation with a total of 197 ratifications. The reason why I say that is to let our people know that this is a conference held by the United Nations, of which we are a part. Just like we go to the UN Assembly in September each year, this is also a critical meeting held under the auspices of the United Nations. Why is this important? We are facing today the scourge of climate change. And I really want to encourage our people to really get more involved. We have to take this very, very seriously. There has never been such a serious threat to our very existence as a country as climate change is. So when we say existential threat, it speaks, of course, to our very existence. It has to be taken extremely seriously. Our country, these small island states, especially in the Caribbean, we are facing the fact of whether we can continue to exist or not. That is how serious and critical the matter is. I am not going to mix or mince words when it comes to that. And that is why it is important that each year, especially the countries that are being affected the most and those countries that had very little to do with the climate change, that we have to show up and show up in our numbers and let our voices be bigger than the space we occupy on the earth, because we are being affected most. Hence, we had to walk with a solid team to this meeting this year. And of course, you can see that we had a large contingent. But I want to set some things clear, that that large contingent was extremely necessary for us to make the necessary arguments, for us to put forward our own positions so that we could be very clearly understood. And the reason why we walk with such a large contingent, and it was comprised of multiple persons who I will speak to as well, because this has to do with how we are going to deal with the issue of climate change here in our country. So let me touch on a number of things. One, we had to deal with COP from the perspective of how are we going to survive as a country. So what did I do when I took our contingent there? Is to make the argument with respect to our sustainable island state agenda. Our sustainable island state agenda is our response of how we are going to deal with the scourge of climate change. That agenda, which took us maybe a year to put together with our partners who will be mentioned by others when they come to the fore, of course, that agenda is an agenda that we put forward to give St. Kitts and Nevis the best chance of dealing with the scourge of climate change. And I had the opportunity, of course, with the others to present at various fora while I was at COP 28. For example, I had the opportunity to be at our own pavilion. And to this end, there are a number of persons that I want to highlight. Give me the opportunity to point them out so that people can know from the beginning that what we did here was in collaboration with others, so that people do not think anyway that we spent a lot of money to take a large contingent to COP, and that it caused the country of St. Kitts and Nevis significant amount of money. That is not so. As a matter of fact, the COP was basically sponsored. And I want to thank those who participated. And let me give you the names of those, of course. So let me do that, because it is important that we highlight that. So I want to, of course, talk to our global partners who partnered with us, the Republic of China, Taiwan, who was a sponsor as well, the Global Fund for Women, Girls KJA, the MRV Hub, the UNFCCC, and the mission in Dubai. All, of course, collaborated. And I want to say we got support from the Republic of China and Taiwan, and this remains our strongest partner and delivered for St. Kitts and Nevis at a time when we needed maximum voices at COP28. Critically important, because I want to say to our people that even though we were large, we had to be large. We had a pavilion, but that our trip was supported and supported financially as well. The importance of COP28, which I've already outlined, and is really where we took stock at COP28, to see where we are in the world when it comes to dealing with the issue of fossil fuel, capitalization of loss and damage. That fund, which we will speak to later on. Energy transition and renewable energy for all of our people. That is critically important as well. So St. Kitts and Nevis, we presented with partners included. For example, SICRI, CDB, 5Cs. These are our development partners who we were able to join in UAE and present our voice, or our voices to the world when it comes to the issue of climate change and the position of St. Kitts and Nevis. I also had the opportunity to speak at a number of fora, one of them being for the first time, we had the issue of climate change and health. As a spokesperson for CARICOM and issues of health, I presented at a forum which included, for example, Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, persons who are in the international, on the international stage dealing with these issues. I'm going to champion this for our region and bring this argument even stronger to the world. One of the matters that I wanted to point out here as it comes to health, and I'm not going to speak much longer, is that a lot of the things that we are dealing with, they have to do with climate change. For example, you hear us want to build a smart hospital. And I keep saying a climate smart hospital because we have to now change our infrastructure for health if we are to survive under the scourge of climate change. And that is why we are starting that hospital in 2024, so that we can withstand stronger hurricanes or even the insidious changes that come with climate change. For example, increased heat, increased humidity. The issue of health, we are dealing right now with dengue in St. Kitts and Nevis. That is an issue that we are dealing with that comes from climate change. And that is always affecting your health. The heat that we are dealing with, the summer was the hottest summer on record. Now people who did not need the air conditioner are asking for air conditioning now, which means now houses have to start to be equipped in that way. Because if you don't deal with the heat, it would affect your health. The stress that comes from climate change, because less rain, less food, increased food prices, of course, all these things are being affected because of climate change. From the very food you eat, the cost of your food, the cost of your transportation, the cost of your electricity, and everything else that comes with these changes. So I want us to now start to see climate change as it's affecting our lives, but not in insidious ways. The stronger storms that we are expecting. This year had the highest number of named storms in the history of the Atlantic hurricane season. This year, we were spared, and we thank God for sparing us, because it's only He could have saved us or protected us. But based on where we are heading, this can actually become the norm, where we get hit by serious hurricanes year after year after year. This climate change is not anything separate and apart from us. It's affecting us presently. It's costing the government hundreds of millions of dollars just to adapt and to build the resilience. So if we don't get this if we don't get it dealt with, if we don't get the temperature of the earth not to pass 1.5, the reality of existing in the Caribbean will change significantly. And that is the message I want to bring today, that climate change is going to change how we live in St. Kitts and Nevis and in the region. If we don't let our voices be sounded on the international stage and be so strong that it forces policy changes, our very existence as a country is at risk. And I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about now. The next hurricane season could be the worst that we have ever seen. And if you are hit by 2 back-to-back Category 5 hurricanes, where will we be in St. Kitts and Nevis? It will be hard to survive. That is why we have to act quickly on our sustainable island state agenda, adapting, building resilience, coming stronger, so that we have the infrastructure and what is required for us to continue to live even under the scourge of climate change. If that does not happen, we will be in serious trouble. So I would let, of course, the others have an opportunity to make their input, but I want to bring one strong message, and I'll finally say, COP28 needed a strong St. Kitts and Nevis. COP28 needed a large delegation. COP28 was funded fundamentally by our partners and cost us hardly anything. And we want to thank our partners for their financial support. COP28 had ministers and technicians, and I see Advisor Chris is here as well, who was also part of that delegation. So all of these persons went to COP28 so that we could have said that St. Kitts and Nevis is small, and I said it in a few fora, but we are Talawa, which means we are small, but we are bold, and we will say to the world, we need action, and we need action now. So I want to thank you all very, very much as we continue this press conference this morning, and to thank this team, which will speak more than I do now, for their full participation and their full presence when it came to COP28. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now, each minister and each delegate will bring greetings while also indicating the reason that they participated at COP and in what capacity. So we'll start with Senior Minister. Senior Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me, of course, recognize our Prime Minister here at their table and my other colleagues, part of the delegation that had traveled to the United Arab Emirates, specifically to Dubai, just a few days ago, and now reporting on our absence from Federation during that period of time and exactly what it is that we were seeking to do at what is now dubbed as COP28 UAE. As you've heard, it was the 28th conference of interested parties who had signed up as concerned entities, countries, persons, organizations concerned about the way the world was in fact going. There was, of course, a heightened consciousness being brought to the attention of global leaders and multilateral organizations and individuals over a period of time. And that is that we should pay closer attention to the climatic changes that are taking place in the world and being able to look at what the science is teaching us, that these changes are in fact threatening the survivability of mankind. It is being said that with the large consumption of fossil fuel, for example, and with the waste coming from this, the burning of coal or diesel or whatever energy form we may have in terms of providing energy, that if we are not very careful, we would soon destroy mankind. It is said that the world is heating up. And the more the world heats up, the more the level of the oceans would rise. And the more that the oceans levels rise, the more we are subjected to the possibility of seriously being undertaken by water. And already in the Pacific Islands, we know that there are countries there, part of which are already under water. So from these observations, from time to time, the world is called to attention. And this is what we did when we went to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates as part of the COP28 team from St. Kitts and Nevis, not only to lend support to what I have just said in terms of our own fears and concerns as to what would happen eventually to our beaches, what would happen eventually to our own landscape, what would happen eventually to the agriculture that we practice in order to produce food. What is going to happen to us in the future if we are not part and parcel of the ongoing global discussion with regard to the effects of climate change? And so we were able to put our case to the rest of the world. We were able to say that although we are a small nation, and maybe one that is going to be important in having our voice heard in these international debates and discussions, we could not miss being there. And so I want to thank you for coming out this morning to listen to why we were there and ask us questions so that you would be better informed and educated as to exactly what was COP28 and why St. Kitts and Nevis was there and what it is we have taken away from this very important international meeting hosted by the United Nations. Thank you.
Minister Maynard, proceed.
Pleasant good morning to all. Pleasant good morning to my colleagues at the head table. And I want to recognize the Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, and our Minister in the Ministry of Social Development, etc., Honorable Iseline Phillip. It is, and it was my esteemed pleasure to be a part of the delegation to travel to the Conference of Party 28, which this year was held in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And I would like to extend thanks to the people, government of the United Arab Emirates for their excellent hosting of our delegation, and also to COP28 for facilitating us as they did. COP is an opportunity to interact and engage with the international community to further our cause as it relates to building resilience in the face of climate change. I know the Prime Minister mentioned that we were largely sponsored, meaning the government did not expend much money for this trip. But I want to add that given the significance and importance of COP and the Conference of Parties in relation to our own survivability here in St. Kitts and Nevis, if we had to pay, it will be well worth every single penny. We cannot count pennies in terms of our survival. And the benefits which are there to be derived from an investment in being present and making our voices heard is sometimes invaluable. The voices of the SIDS are so important that it is important for us to be there collectively. If it is one SID from the Pacific Ocean, the voice will be muted out by everything else that is there. If it is one SID, small island developing state from the Caribbean, that voice could be muted out in the presence of 160 countries and 70,000 participants at COP. And so that is why together, not just as a nation, St. Kitts and Nevis, us as small island developing states need to be present and collectively bring our voices together, because we are the ones at the face of the damage being caused by climate change. I also want to remind, as the Minister for Foreign Affairs mentioned, that there are some islands in the Pacific, etc., that have disappeared. They don't exist anymore. And we may laugh at that and say, well, we have mountains. I want to remind that Bastia is largely at sea level, maybe in some cases below. So the impact of climate change is a real thing for us. It is an existential threat to what we have come to know as St. Kitts and Nevis. Just in terms of why I was being there, of course, when it comes to the environment, a lot of it has to do with how we are going to have a just and equitable transition for energy. And so I was privileged to be a part of a discussion organized by the International Renewable Agency, IRENA, and the Alliance of Small Island States, IOSIS, in collaboration with COP28, of course, and the SIDS Lights Out Initiative, where the discussion was small island developing states, a just and equitable energy transition towards a climate resilient future, where we were able to discuss the threats that we face and how we can build partnerships to overcome them. I used the opportunity to highlight a nexus which is very important for us, the nexus of energy, water, food, and then I could add in industry. Because as I like to say, if we solve energy, we solve water. If we solve water, we solve food. If we solve energy, we solve industry. And if we solve industry, we solve salaries. I also had the opportunity to speak with the Saudi Development Fund, where we made our case for partnership in the geothermal project, and we can speak about that a little later. I also participated in the Green Hydrogen Implementation Forum at the NDC Pavilion, where we witnessed the signing of an MOU between Answer McCall of Trinidad and Kenneth J. Green Limited, also of Trinidad, for the green energy development throughout the Caribbean. This is an initiative that will allow for the offtake of green products created from renewable energy, such as green hydrogen. So I want to thank again the team for ensuring that St. Kitts and Nevis is well represented. You are not heard unless you're present, and the importance of having high-level delegation cannot be understated. When, for instance, a minister is present, you get to sit at certain tables. When a minister is not present, you don't get to sit at those tables. And St. Kitts and Nevis has been absent for some time, but we intend to be present because our survival depends on it. Thank you very much.
Minister Clark, you'll bring greetings in about 2 minutes.
Greetings, everyone. I'm happy to report that for COP28, I was able to join ministers of environment and climate action from across the region, and in particular across the world, to negotiate, to lobby for a secure, renewable future. Importantly, our federation needed to present its sustainable island state agenda to our global partners and to possible funders. The magnitude of COP is such that I could not do it alone as the Minister of Environment and Climate Action. It would be an impossible task. That the Ministers of Energy, the Foreign Minister, and most importantly, our Head of State, the Prime Minister, was able to join our delegation, lead our delegation in particular, gives me great hope for the sustainable, climate-resilient future for St. Kitts and Nevis. If one minister speaks about climate action, we are failing. That foreign policy and diplomacy and energy, and infrastructure, and finance can speak to climate action, gender, and youth, and agriculture, and tourism, it means there is hope for St. Kitts and Nevis, because climate change not only affects the environment, it affects how we live and how we survive. Who best to share the message of climate change and climate resilience? Our youth. And that is why the intention of the Ministry of Environment when we presented COP27 to you and our post-press conference was to expand our delegation. And we did that. Half of our delegation were youth. Their voices were amplified. Their message was delivered to the global stage. They were given an opportunity that we must give every young person in St. Kitts to have a critical voice, the loudest voice in how we create a resilient future based on renewable energy. That's why we went to COP, and I'm happy it was a success for St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. As a marine biologist and a climate justice advocate, my purpose at COP was really to align with supporting collective action and to reduce the impacts of climate change as we explore the mechanisms for growth opportunities in St. Kitts and Nevis, and also to implement principles on sustainable, resilient, and ocean-based economy. I was also sponsored by the Global Fund for Women.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. My name is Josiah Burkett. While I did not attend the COP conference in person, I was one of the technical presenters. And one of my presentations looked at the harnessing GIS, Geographical Information Systems, for St. Kitts and Nevis as it relates to the SDGs and climate action. I am here today as well to share a technical brief, as some of the team members are in current consultations, and this technical brief will update you as to what was some of the outcomes in the participation of COP28.
And there we will continue with that technical brief by Mr. Burkett. He will give a synopsis of the negotiations and the current situation on ground. Mr. Burkett.
Thank you. So the technical brief and update from St. Kitts and Nevis participation at COP28. One of the most critical expected outputs of COP28 is a strong and robust global stocktake report. This report provides an update on the progress that parties have made to achieve the long-term temperature goal, limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursuing efforts to 1.5 degrees Celsius. For St. Kitts and Nevis, and like all AOSIS member states, the GST report must be based on the best available science, including the outputs of the 6th assessment reports. At COP28, Ms. Cheryl Jeffers is leading efforts in research and systematic observations, focusing on tracking scientific progress and identifying gaps. Unfortunately, the science has confirmed that a significant gap in mitigation ambition and action, as we are off track for staying within the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit. Mr. Jonathan Kelly has been following the mitigation agenda items and is dedicated to supporting the AOSIS Mitigation Coordinator of Belize in the following key areas. The GST outcome should establish the key elements to support a course correction on mitigation so that our collective actions are aligned with the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. These elements must set the level of ambition to ensure a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035 relative to the 2019 level, and to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Global goals to at least triple renewable energy and double energy efficiency, phase out fossil fuel subsidies, as well as to phase out fossil fuel production and consumption. Scale up access to support technology and capacity building would be needed to develop and enable parties' respective decarbonization pathways to achieve the above goals. As you are aware, access to much needed finance continues to be a challenge for St. Kitts and Nevis. The accounting officer for the ministry and the newly appointed OFP for GEF, P.S. Williams, has been following the finance matters. The matters discussed at this session include recognizing finance as a critical enabler to respond to adaptation action across contexts and countries, yet finance availability and access are limited in almost all cases, and notes that the share of adaptation finance as a percentage of total spending on mitigation and adaptation has increased, but it is still below levels needed to significantly smaller than the share for mitigation. There is therefore an urgent need to rapidly scale up finance for adaptation to meet growing needs in terms of both the amount of funding available and the speed with which funds flow. Financing gaps relate to aspects such as the speed, adequacy, delivery, predictability, access to the thematic coverage of funding. Other gaps may relate to the application of existing methodologies, poor data quality and availability, limited coordination and coherence across efforts, and limited capacity and knowledge building. So the current state of play as of 3:58 p.m. Dubai time, the COP presidency submitted a draft GST text for parties to consider. This was unfortunately rejected by all parties for different reasons. In some cases, parties rejected the GST for being weak on securing 1.5 degrees, and in other cases, parties thought it was weak on differentiation. All developing countries were unanimous that it was not as strong on means of implementation. Similar critique was addressed to the draft text and the global goal on adaptation. So as of 12:08 p.m. Dubai time, parties were advised that consultations on all outstanding issues will continue throughout the day, which will then be reflected in proposed text. The parties and groups will be advised as to the time and room for consultations. The main objective is to ensure that groups and parties have a full package of decisions to consider later today, but this will be no earlier than 6 p.m. Dubai time. Thank you.
We'll now have the intervention by the St. Kitts Nevis Youth Voice, Ms. Tricia King.
Reading the Youth Delegation COP 28 statement. COP 28 is a melting pot of perspective, ambition, and action. The perfect conditions for transformative connection. The St. Kitts and Nevis Youth Spotlight on Sustainability featured a roundtable for our youth delegates, other specially invited youth, and visitors to the St. Kitts and Nevis Country Pavilion. The discussion was dynamic and centered around three main feathering points: mental health in a sustainable island state, redefining industry and entrepreneurship in the sustainability transition, and amplifying youth partnership. The choice to include a roundtable youth discussion was made with great intention, acknowledging the undeniable importance of increasing engagement with youth as the Federation moves forward in its transition towards sustainability. The conversation explored the nuances of sustainability with the common agreement that true sustainability requires a shift in perspective and a full-scale restructuring of our current systems and operations. On behalf of the SKN COP delegation, permit me to thank Ms. Carice Elliott. She was sponsored by Island Innovation and Open Society Foundation, Ms. Denala Laplace, Ms. Jazzy Connor, supported by Girls Care Jamaica, Mr. Ryan Phillip, Ms. Kezia Daniel, Mr. Connor Greer-Taylor, who was sponsored by UNICEF Innovation 30 campaign and the Global Fund for Women that supported me. Sustainability should be a holistic venture, and the conversation concluded with that shared sentiment. The youth of the Federation are ready to partner and to be included as more than just mere tokens in any discussion. The ideas are ripe for the picking and the willpower is strong. Youth are ready to help reshape sustainability and be the driving force behind our Federation's transition.
Thank you. Thank you kindly. Okay, at this juncture, I will pose no more than 3 questions to the ministerial panel. We'll begin with the Prime Minister. Here a question, You share the global stage with the likes of US Vice President Kamala Harris, Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, and John Kerry, the US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. Speak on showing the interplay and impact of climate and energy and health.
Yes, thank you very, very much. As you have pointed out, we had the opportunity, me in particular, to share the stage with these well-known global leaders. It shows, of course, that St. Kitts Nevis's delegation was well prepared, had, of course, its vision that is very clear and said to the world that we are serious. Now you asked about the question of the interplay between climate change, energy, and health. When we did our Sustainable Island State Plan, and people are now understanding it more and more, our Sustainable Island State Plan is really a framework and to some extent a blueprint and a pathway of how we can create a St. Kitts and Nevis that can deal with the scourge of climate change. There are 7 pillars on which this is premised. However, the nexus, as was said by the Minister of Energy, I like to call it the axle that will hold all of the components together would be energy. Think of it this way, as a wheel. In the middle of the wheel, you have an axle, and connected to it are all the other spokes. Without the axle, it means that the others cannot function effectively and make the wheel turn as smoothly and efficiently as you would need it. And so in dealing with the issue of climate change, here in St. Kitts in particular, to help us to adapt, to become resilient, and to be able to continue to exist, we need to transition to renewable energy. Why? 1, it's going to help us to contribute to saving the planet. 2, it is cheaper. We pay tens of millions of dollars yearly just to subsidize electricity and Skelec so that we don't pass those high costs onto our people. If we get renewable energy, we don't have to worry about a war and the fluctuation of fossil fuel-based energy. It will be reliable, clean, efficient. It will create a lot of jobs. We have just signed the renegotiated SOLEC deal, which is an $80+ million investment plan that will create over 200 solid renewable energy jobs or jobs in the renewable space. If we resolve the issue with energy, we will have water. As we know, we have a lot of water around us where we can have desalination, but to do desalination, you need energy. And if we can produce enough renewable energy, we can have a lot of desalination water to deal with the scourge of droughts. The droughts that we are suffering again are as a result of climate change. So energy can resolve, 1, the cost of energy, its reliability, making sure our people have it. It can bring down the cost of industries, bring down the cost of doing business. For example, hotels or even small businesses in your community where you have a shop and you have on your deep freeze and a fridge, and you see the bill at the end of the month, that bill can come down and help you to divest some of that resource into something else, a bigger shop, for example. And imagine if we live in Cayon and we have all the energy, we can do desal, and the people in Kayon can bathe 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. Why am I breaking it down so simple? It is because the scourge of climate change is really affecting our daily lives in simple ways. And energy can help us to do that. And energy apart, it can create jobs, reliable energy, water. And when you have water and energy, it's food. Food is water and energy. That's all it is. Energy in a form that you can eat. And you need water for that. So if you have energy and water, we can produce more food and become more food secure. With the drought, it's affecting how much food we can produce. With the drought, it's affecting when we can plant. It's changing planting patterns, and our farmers are dealing with it. And so all of that, in terms of adapting, we need that energy. ACs in schools, because these classrooms are getting hotter. We just had to put ACs at the JNF hospital, in the medical ward and surgical ward, because even though you have all those windows, it is still hot up there. So we have to close those windows and put AC system in, which would be completed next week. Those are the changes that we have to make to adapt. We have to do over the roof at the hospital because of the climate change and how it's affecting the old type of materials that we use. The leaking at the hospital is as a result of that. We have to get technology from Taiwan now to help us to deal with it. If we did not have to deal with climate change, you know what that money could be used for? Could be used for a lot of different things. Build more houses, for example. Pave more roads. Do so many other things for our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But that money now, that is why we are saying adaptation is so expensive. And that alone is causing these small countries like ours difficulty. And the opportunity to exist gets smaller. However, hope is there because we think we have a blueprint, a framework to deal with it. Now, when it comes to health, of course, health is part of that. One, the deprivation of water affects health. It means, therefore, you can't bathe as often as possible, wash your hands as much as possible. So the chances of spreading diseases, those chances increase. Two, because of the changing patterns, we are seeing vector-borne diseases just such as dengue right now in November, going into December, right now in December. That started in November. We're dealing with dengue presently as a result of climate change. Because of that, we're not producing enough food. When climate starts to change, that means people can't get the wholesome foods that they would normally have. Stronger hurricanes affect people's health. We know that stronger hurricanes do that. So therefore, I am simply saying that when it comes to climate, we have to adapt, and energy is the crux of the matter because it can help us to deal with many issues. And if we resolve that, we can adapt. And if we adapt, we can deal with the issues of scourge of how this is affecting our health. So it means, therefore, I would say, climate change, energy, health, we resolve the energy matter and get renewable energy in sufficient amount, we can deal with the adaptation and the health matters that are affecting us. And lastly to say, because of all of these changes that are affecting our people, the mental health of our people is severely being affected in many different ways. And if we don't deal with this, that too will get worse. So it's from the physical health to the mental health that can be affected as a result of climate. I just want to say a simple message. Climate change is real and is affecting us, and all of us got to be on board to deal with it. I don't care what might be said or not said. If we don't do that, the chances of our existence is going to be smaller. Just hearing the 2 degrees alone is frightening me. You know what 2 degrees mean? Category 5 hurricanes year after year. Who can survive that? Unless we get so much resources that we can just transform our infrastructure, for example. Those things are difficult to survive. But as I said, there is hope because we spend time to put a framework and a blueprint together to deal with it, called the Sustainable Island State. We are small, but we are Talawa, and we got to fight back. And so all of us should really fight together.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll deviate a little from the original plan, and we're going to open the floor to the media. But before we do, kindly follow these guidelines. All questions will be directed to the Prime Minister's Head of Delegation, who will either respond or field your questions to the relevant person on the panel. Before asking your questions, kindly state your name, and the media host that you represent. And each media representative will be allowed to ask at least 2 questions at a time. That is to allow for the smooth flow of events and to give the ministers adequate time in which to respond. So the floor is open.
Good morning, everyone. Kevin Brown, WinFM. First question, what about this COP was different, specifically as it relates to access to financing? Because we know financial pledges has been a thing at various COPs over the years, and this year was the agreement on the loss and damage funding was celebrated. What about the loss and damage funding, the pledges to that fund, what about that is different to other pledges like the Paris Agreement? And additionally, are we at all worried about the participation or influence of fuel lobbyists, fossil fuel lobbyists at these delegations, at these COP events? How do we imagine this may impact forward progress in climate change, decarbonization, et cetera? Thank you.
Yeah, I thought this, no, Honorable Joy Clark, yes.
Thank you. Win Media, thank you for that question. So in terms of, I'll start with the last one. In terms of oil lobbyists participating in the conversation, COP brings together oil lobbyists, heads of state, ministers from various areas, climate activists, media, funding agencies, financial institutions. Everyone has an equal space in COP to partner, and youth voices importantly. And the conversation around COP28, which makes it different, was 3 things. 1, the global stocktake. Where are we in terms of our commitment in the Paris Agreement, which was to limit global temperature increase by 1.5 degrees? That was a commitment there. In terms of where we are in the capitalization of critical funds, the loss and damage fund. So the difference for COP28, COP27 had the establishment of the fund, which was a 20-year conversation that happened because of the leadership of SIDS and AOSIS, led by Antigua and Barbuda. And thirdly, the capitalization of the loss and damage fund finally, which meant that heading into COP, I think we were in flight on our way to COP, and there was a celebration because ministers saw the news that the presidency committed, I think, $58 million to the fund, the UAE presidency, and that was great for countries, for SIDS in particular, that before we had the negotiations, we had such a significant contribution from the presidency itself. What we need to do now is, and that's why the negotiations continue, how do we strike a balance, an equitable balance between transitioning to renewable energies and phasing out or phasing down the use of fossil fuels? I think, Prime Minister, if I may, I should pass this question to Foreign Minister, because this is about diplomacy and negotiations and investment options for countries that make lots of money from fossil fuels and developing countries like St. Kitts and Nevis who need to transition away from fossil fuel, but we need fossil fuels to develop. But we must transition to renewable energy, and that goes beyond climate. It becomes a foreign diplomacy, a foreign issue and investments, if I may, Prime Minister.
Right. I think Dr. Clark is very right in the sense that if we are going to achieve a lot of these objectives and our goals that we have set, we have to make sure that we are present at the table when negotiations of this kind are taking place. Just imagine we have been speaking with the Saudi Arabian government just maybe 4 weeks ago. As you would know, the ministers, the prime ministers from the Caribbean region, and the two presidents that we have, Guyana and Suriname. We were actually in Saudi Arabia. And we were very successful there in negotiating with Saudi Arabian government an agreement for $40 million to assist in the improvement of our electricity generating plant here in St. I mention that specifically because Saudi Arabia, as you know, one of the richest countries and one of the emerging powerful countries, its entire economy is mainly driven from its petroleum product that it has. So here we are saying at the COP, we want to decrease the amount of fuel, oil, gas, and so forth that these countries are producing. But at the same time, we are negotiating with these same countries to give us money to assist us in generating electricity from the very product that they are selling and the very product that would have made them wealthy over the years around the world. And so it takes a certain amount of diplomacy in trying to achieve the two things. To get them to reduce their dependence, to get them to reduce their mining of fossil fuel, but at the same time, we are saying, let us get some of that wealth that you have to assist us in developing our own country. So it takes a certain amount of diplomacy and negotiation to achieve those two things at the same time. You've heard the government of the UAE, I think, is the first government that came with the massive contribution to the COP that we spoke about. Emirates and UAE. As you would know, the UAE is five emirates come together, 7 emirates, sorry, and the emirate which is the capital of the UAE is Abu Dhabi. Dubai is only one of the 7. One of the 7 is also Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the UAE 7 states. But what do you think drives the economy in Abu Dhabi? Gas. Again, therefore, they have used the enormous wealth that they have naturally, and they are making contributions to do exactly what the world is saying that they should do: decrease our dependence on fossil fuel. Please help us to transition from dependence on that to renewable energy, which we are saying to them, you may not have naturally, but which you can engender and show the world that the transition can be made. And so one of the countries right now that is fueling its development, that is powering its manufacturing and people's daily lives, is harnessing the energy from the sun. So Abu Dhabi is one of those countries, UAE, I should say, is one of those countries that is making massive investment in transitioning from its dependence on oil to harnessing the sun through solar energy, which is exactly what we're trying to do here in St. Kitts. It takes, therefore, diplomacy, good relations being built between the countries to say to them, Don't do that, but at the same time, give us some of what you are benefiting from, and we will support you in other parts, in other ways, as you endeavor your own national development strategies.
Okay, so let me also recognize the media houses and our guests on the virtual platform. If there is a question, please use the raise your hand feature, or you can just simply type your question in the chat box and preface it with a letter Q or the word question, and I will acknowledge as many as I can. We have one more journalist on the floor.
Mervyn Thompson, ZIZ. This is kind of a follow-up to your question, Kevin. And coming from COP28, Minister, you spoke about the celebration of the pledge for 58 million. But at the same time, the president also said that there's no science supporting the 1.5 increase and how that would affect the planet. And then there's the draft resolution that was put forward, and there is no mention. They intentionally left out the phasing out of fossil fuels, which is basically the driving force for the heating of the planet. So how effective is COP? Like, why do we participate? If I'm hosting and I'm going to say I'm giving you money, but I'm going to leave out this thing because it, as Minister Douglas has said, it is the driving force of their economy. So it would hamper their development as well. And to Mr. Burkett, is that your name? Can you further explain in a simpler way how the layman, the common man, how the GIS system and climate change affects the regular person?
Thank you very much. I think that is a critical question. I think the foreign minister touched on it, that it's a delicate dance sometimes. Whereas you are phasing in one and you're looking at the other, understanding that different countries are at different places, how do you then negotiate for those things that you can achieve? So even though you may not get everything that you want, and I'm speaking about anyone who would be at the table, it is about what is the best that we can achieve at this particular time. Let me say a couple of things with respect to that. One, for example, let's say you did not get that terminology in the final document. By going to COP, there are a number of critical things that we got out of it. One, we had negotiations for funding for geothermal, for example. Had we not gone to COP, I am certain that that would not have happened. And I'm sure the Minister of Energy will speak more to more commitments to deal with the geothermal. Going to COP, when I shared the stage with VP Harris, one of the things that she mentioned is that she's in negotiation with me, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, on helping the transition. She specifically said that and called me by name. That took it to a different realm. If I had not gone to COP and we had not gone to COP, that would not have happened. We met with the International Energy Agency, and I think the Minister of Energy will also speak to that. If I had not gone to COP, if we had not gone to COP, that would not have happened, and the tangibles that come from that. We met with X-Prize, where I had the opportunity to speak again about our Sustainable Island State agenda. If we had not gone to COP, that would not have happened. I had the opportunity to speak at the first Climate and Health Forum at any COP, speaking on behalf of small island states around the world. That's this stage that Bill Gates had, that Michael Bloomberg had, that the head of the European Commission had. And there I was, John Kerry had. And there I was representing St. Kitts and Nevis and all of the small island developing states around the world, bringing a message that we need action and we need it now. And one of the things that I said is that we're not looking for sympathy. We are looking for partnerships. If we had not gone to COP, that would not have happened. And so I would say, even though all of the things that one person may want to be in a final declaration, even though they are not all there, I can say with certainty that needle moved. And it certainly moved for St. Kitts and Nevis. And that is why I want to thank the young people. The young people of St. Kitts and Nevis, they must carry this. This has nothing to do with politics. This is beyond partisan politics. This is about our existence. I am particularly using my voice like this so that it can sound and transmit that this is an urgent matter. I hope my voice is transmitting that. It is critically important, and we have to be at the table, wherever the table is, making the voice, our voices be heard, until we can reach that point of that we call the most ideal. However, even though we may not be there yet, let the negotiations continue, because, as I said, and I will finally say, that COP28, especially for St. Kitts and Nevis, the needle was moved in the right direction.
Mr. Bat.
Lindbergh, SKN Newsline.
To answer the question as it relates to GIS and its impact on climate action, what I had presented at COP28 in the technical sessions related to the establishment of a national spatial data infrastructure in St. Kitts and Nevis as it relates to GIS. So quick definition, Geographical Information Systems is a system that allows you to collect, analyze, store, visualize data, and manage data. So St. Kitts and Nevis has done a great job as it relates to GIS, but now it needs to do more. How this relates to climate action, it allows St. Kitts and Nevis to monitor climate action initiatives. Data is critical to that. So we get funding, yes. What is the impact of that funding? How has it improved the situation? If it's energy, if it's vulnerability as it relates to hurricanes, natural disasters, where is the vulnerable population? The decision makers need to make informed decisions, and they can only do that with data. So GIS is critical in helping make informed decisions. The establishment of the NSDI would now help create a direction. This was a framework developed by the UNGGIM, and it will help us establish a national GIS so we can save money instead of different departments getting access to funding and then repeating the same data collection processes. We can now partner with the Department of Water Resources, the Department of Agriculture. We can compile this data, we can help make decisions and send it to the decision makers at NEMA. Currently, there are projects ongoing with the Met Office. So GIS is critical in climate action and combating climate change, and the ability for us to look at our resources, particularly even land. What is the uses of the land currently? And you would see some of this coming out of the NPDP. So as it relates to GIS and climate action, the data is a big component. It allows us to monitor, it allows us to visualize what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis, make informed decisions, and be more proactive than reactive to climate change.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Bat.
Good morning, all. Glenn Berg, SKN Newsline. Mr. Prime Minister, the agreement that is now in a state of incompleteness, what were your expectations going into COP28 in regards to the kinds of decisions that you wanted to see happening? And how are you disappointed at this point in time that perhaps some of those decisions have not gone the way for small island states? Secondly, can you comment on whether or not the level or ease of access to financial funding for transitioning into renewable energy, has it gotten any easier with this COP28 summit? And what can we expect coming out of this summit going forward for the next year into the next convention?
Thank you very much, Glenn, and I'm sure others here will be able to assist in the answer. With respect to going into COP28, there were some wins. And as I said previously, you may not be able to get everything because, as the foreign minister says, this is negotiation, correct? And in negotiations, you hardly get everything that you want. However, I would say that the needle was moved because we got loss and damage. Loss and damage has been an issue that was of great controversy and was not accepted until this COP. That helps these small island developing states such as St. Kitts and Nevis. Very critical. So that alone is a significant achievement for us. The other thing that I would say with respect to COP28, even though you did not get everything you need in terms of funding, and it was mentioned that UAE, of course, contributed significantly, and other countries also contributed significantly. And I think there will be more pledges coming out. But what I also recognized that was fresh at this COP was that you had the business world and you had the philanthropic organizations at the table that also would help in funding. For example, I was able to go to the X Prize discussion where they are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into resolving the climate issue. That is a step in the right direction. As I said before, I was on the stage with persons who are known for their great philanthropy, who have, of course, put monies in funds to be accessed. So I see more money that was pledged. I also see the possibilities of more access. But even outside of that, the side meetings that we had, St. Kitts and Nevis did extremely well. The minister can speak about the Green Climate Fund and how we are seeking to access that, and we have started to access it. And I'm hoping that based on who were at the table, that will become even easier and simpler. But we were able to do a lot of things for St. Kitts and Nevis because of who were there. Geothermal, for example, we got the pledge that the gap of the $20 million that I spoke about, or the Premier spoke about, we got the pledge that we will fill that. So that is a big advancement. I was able to negotiate other type of investments for St. Kitts and Nevis. The foreign minister is here. For example, a cardiac center for St. Kitts and Nevis because we were at COP. So we had other opportunities to seek funding for our transition that was not directly related to the fund, but it gave us the opportunity because of the players who were there to actually help us to do. We met with a number of companies who are interested in investing in renewable energy, who will be visiting St. Kitts over the next few months to look for the opportunities to invest. That too is part of accessing funding. It does not always have to come from a fund where people put money and you get it. Philanthropy, business, and governance. So this COP offered multiple opportunities to access funding to help us in our transition. That is why we wanted a large delegation. So when I'm in one meeting, the foreign minister in one, the minister for energy in one, the minister for sustainability in one, the young people negotiating. That is what we went to do. That was our strategy, getting as much spaces as we can so that we can access from different avenues the resources we need, financial and otherwise, to help us in our transition, adaptation, and building resiliency. So I would say for us, our strategy has worked thus far, and we expect to see the tangible results because of that. And that is why I want to thank our team and thank the young people, thank those who are not even a direct part of the civil service, but who are part of the team to make sure that we will derive as much as we could have from COP20.
All right. This next question comes from the online platform. Is there any member of the St. Kitts Nevis delegation that remains at COP28 now until its conclusion while major outcomes are being drafted and finalized?
Dr. Clark?
Great, thank you for that question. And importantly, the update read by Mr. Josiah Burkett was presented by P.S. Williams, who is one of our 3 negotiators. They sit in the negotiations right now as we speak. Cheryl Jeffords, our Chief Technical Officer in Climate Action, and Mr. Jonathan Kelly from SKN. We were very, very intentional in ensuring that we had the negotiators from SKN, because COP28 was about the energy transition, and the UNFCCC focal point, Ms. Nerissa Williams and Cheryl Jeffords, who also functions in a regional space, are there presenting St. Kitts and Nevis's position and supporting the CARICOM position on the transition. And of course, I think they said that they can give us an update now, but we already had that read. And we do recognize that with all parties being part of the negotiations, whether you say phase out, phase down, or the timeline, it's going to shift billions of dollars. And that is really what the negotiations are about. How do small island states survive, and how do developed countries shift their resources? Billions of dollars are at play, but equally, the survival of planet Earth is at play.
Thank you. There's a next question on the floor.
Yes. In terms of education, because a lot of what's being said here today is a lot of technical language that's not really going to be gravitating much towards the layman on the street, especially the fishermen and all of this. How is what you guys just attended going to benefit them specifically? Let us move aside from all of this talk about geothermal and all of this. How is this going to benefit them? But I just want to ask two quick questions. One, coming out of COP, Mr. Prime Minister, this one's more directed to you. How is there any immediate plans, concessions, or legislation that we can see be instituted in the short term, immediately, that will bring some of the benefits that we saw coming out of COP from the administration attending COP? And also, you spoke about the health. Again, a lot of us in this room may understand a lot of the connections, but for the people in St. Kitts and Nevis and across the region, how is the whole issue of climate change impacting the overall? You mentioned dengue and all of that, and the possible return of other mosquito-borne diseases, but can you go a bit more in-depth in terms of the connection between health and climate change? A little bit more in-depth. Thanks.
Right, I would let the Minister of Energy deal with the first part. Since health is so specific, I will address it after.
Thank you for the question. In terms of down to the regular and the layman, as you said, picture this. In the last 10 years alone, rainfall has decreased by almost 20%. Meanwhile, we continue to build houses, we continue to use more water. In that time, we are over-extracting our aquifers, which means that there are many people who are listening now who do not have 24-hour water service. That is almost a direct result of the impacts of climate change. Before now, all of our water came from rainfall, whether we captured it above the ground, surface water, or we drilled into the ground to extract the water from our aquifers. What is happening now, as I said, rainfall has decreased by 20%, almost 20% over the last 10 years. It has decreased by 40% just over last year alone, up to late summer. So we do not have the same sources that we had before. So that's a direct impact of climate change on us. When you talk about sea level rising as well, our aquifers are obviously below the ground. When we extract too much, something has to fill the space. What fills the space? The intrusion of salt water. The higher the sea levels, especially our aquifers that are closer to the coast, will be impacted. So how then do we solve this particular issue? Firstly, we are surrounded by a large reservoir of water, but it has a high saline content because it's seawater. We can use that water to become potable, but we need what to do that? Energy. Significant amounts of energy to convert the water from the sea into potable water. We also need energy if we find additional resources of water, let's say in the northeastern part of the country where we know we have rain on a regular basis. So we anticipate, and we're presently studying that now, to possibly find more reservoirs of water, which might be deeper in the ground, which will need more energy to extract it by having pumps run 24 hours a day. So the reality is we need to find a way of how we are going to get affordable energy in order to solve the water problem so that you and I can have water 24 hours a day. So that our farmers who are planting, who used to depend on rain patterns, but now cannot, they need water for their farms. So I think the Prime Minister mentioned that energy is one of the critical parts, if not the central cog of our just transition in the face of climate change. So this is one aspect that can affect persons directly. When you're at home and you turn on your pipe and there is no water, that's climate change. That's why we need to be present in these fora to say, look, what does a just energy transition look like? We have not contributed to this problem at all. St. Kitts and Nevis, the small island states, could never produce enough greenhouse gases to affect our climate. Yet, we are on the forefront of saltwater intrusion in our aquifers, reduced rainfall. I understand that there is a hotel that has lost a whole beach, gone. So they have, can I call the name? Koi Resort, I believe, has lost a whole beach because of the impacts of climate change. So they can't now advertise to be a beach resort, to attract tourists, to then have our persons work. So it is all connected. The Prime Minister will speak about the health aspects of climate change. So these are some real tangible things that people will feel if we do not pay attention to climate change. And when I look around and we are at COP, we see our colleagues there. My colleagues of energy were there. Minister colleagues for climate were there. Environment were there. We had ministers for agriculture. We didn't have agriculture. We had education. We didn't have education. Luckily, the Prime Minister is also health, so we had health representation. We had ministers for tourism. They are making their case because they are saying that climate change is affecting all of these and we need to be part of the just transition because we are not the ones who are causing it, but we are the ones who are suffering greatly. And you see it every day. One last thing, climate change and all that is happening as well, because we need energy to power everything. The fuel prices are skyrocketing and have for some time and will continue. The government is paying that cost. When you look on your bill right now, if your bill is $10, if your bill is $20, the government might be paying 5, 6, or 7 of that, and you're paying 12. When the government pays that $5, $6, $7, then it means it may not have enough money to do a social protection program. It may mean that it doesn't have enough money to finish the roads. It may mean there's not enough money to provide extra jobs. And so by transitioning to green energy, we eliminate the government having to pay that variation of fuel cost so that we can put those monies to other youths that are going to directly impact the man and woman of St. Kitts and Nevis. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
Right. With respect to health, again, Abel, let's break it down. For example, this summer you were much hotter, correct? This heat may not affect you as much because of your age. You're still fairly young. The reason why we had to put ACs at the medical ward and the surgical ward, imagine you have a 75-year-old person there with heart condition, with the temperature rising. That is more stress on the heart. We are actually seeing extra deaths across the world and extra deaths across the region because of this. That would result in more death, which we are seeing. The second thing, Abel, we are dealing with dengue, and we have people somebody who is hospitalized because of dengue. Again, because of the change in the rainfall patterns, we are seeing that is directly affecting people. The other thing is the constant threat of storms. Don't you think this is having mental health issue? Oh, the category 5 is coming, board up. Oh, you're going to miss us, it's going to hit us. That's going to be constant. 30 plus named storms every minute, board up, take down, or it coming, it's not coming, God help us, which we really should continuously pray for sparing us. But the message is, this is actually causing a lot of strain on the mental health of our people, which means they have less resilience to deal with issues at home, issues at work. The chances of tipping increases. When you, for example, go in and you say, boy, I go on market and the food looks scarce, I ain't getting enough food. You're wondering, where going to get the cheaper food from? Those are the kind of things. When you go to a hotel and they say, boy, we can't because, you know, the climate change affecting here, we can't hire as much people as we have. The beach ain't there no more, so as much people ain't coming. That is affecting you, can't get a job, affecting you mentally as well. That is why we had a separate forum for mental health and climate change. So we will see increased temperature and all of issues. We'll see stronger storms and all of the physical and mental health issues. We will see more dengue. We will see more chikungunya and all these things that will pass through. These are going to affect us. And the extra deaths I'm suspecting is going to stay until we adapt to it. Because the heat is killing more of our people. The vector-borne illnesses will kill more people. The stress is going to hurt our people. More blood pressure, more blood sugar, more heart attack, more strokes. That is already affecting us. So if you ask me, more infection in the lungs. So the mental health issues that we are seeing, some of it coming from climate change, a lot of it. The other health issues that we are seeing affecting us. The issue is most of our people who are in this room today are people who are fairly healthy and we are resilient and we are resisting. But for our vulnerable populations, I can safely say that they are already being affected significantly as a result of the scourge of climate change. So it comes from lack of water, which causing people to have more food-borne illnesses. We just say, okay, I had a little diarrhea because I eat something, and we brush it off. But what is happening when you add up the numbers and we see that increasing, we know that people don't have enough access to water to wash their hands and clean themselves because of the constant drought, the intrusion in the wells. Therefore, we can only pump a certain amount. And so we are actually seeing these things that are affecting us. What we need to do now, and you are right, is to tie the climate change issues to people's daily lives so that they can see the relationship. And I have asked the Minister of Sustainable Development, Dr. Joel Clark, to start a robust communication campaign where we make exactly that link, so that the man in Keyon who doesn't have water can understand one of the reasons why he doesn't have water and why we have to drill and spend significant amount of millions to make sure that they get water. And those millions could have been used for something else. So therefore, when it cannot be used for a social program, the social program is suffer. And that in itself can affect, of course, the benefits of what those social programs could have been. So the issue is we have to make that link. And don't take these things for granted. You're hearing the dengue, but how much of us say dengue, climate change? Very few of us. And therefore, that is the link that we want to make. So the Minister of Sustainable Development is putting that team together that's going to start that robust communication. I am not
sounding alarming because I want to. It is a reality. We know that if we don't adapt and this temperature continues to rise, just as islands have disappeared, as the foreign minister would have mentioned, we are at loss. Let me make the last point. You go to the beach, for example. St. Kitts used to have clean beaches. You can't go and not see seaweed anymore. The fishermen go out to fish to talk about climate change because of the seaweed getting involved in their engine, the propeller, as they call it, the prop, as the fishermen would call it, which is deteriorating his equipment. So when he go out and he see all this seaweed and he get in between his engine, he has to link that to climate change because that is the issue. When he goes out, then he see that the coral reefs are disappearing, and as a result, he has less fish to catch. He has to link that to climate change. And when all of these are affecting him, he has mental health issues to deal with. Less money, less fish. How am I going to live? How am I going to eat? My engine going bad. This thing is affecting me. Again, all of us are being affected by the climate change presently, but the linkages are not being made. And I want this COP to be a demarcation in our lives as Kittitians and Nevisians, and understand that this is the biggest existential threat that we have ever faced as a country, and it is real, so that all of us can really play our part to deal with the scourge of climate change. I can say clearly that the next 5 years are going to be extremely challenging, because even the benefits that would be derived from adaptation and shifting, that has to take time to be seen. So we have to first deal with the issues of worsening climate, droughts, and all of those things before we start seeing the benefits. And the benefits might be not go back to how we were in the 1950s, might just be bringing back us to where we are today. Because where we are today, this will get worse over the next 5 to 10 years. So again, we just have to make sure that we make the linkages. And I want to say to the media, you have a responsibility as well. You can research. You can break down the technical information into everyday layman's language because you break down a lot of other things. Help the layman to understand what this means, independent even of us. Research it, break it down, do your own campaign to educate your people, because the media also have a responsibility of educating the people in the country or region where they serve. And I want to challenge the media to make climate change part of its objective, so that you can educate or help us to educate the people as to what is happening. And also, people from the opposition side should be speaking to this as well, because this is going to affect all of us. This is beyond the party politics. It is now, how do we survive as a people? I have to say it. I took long to reach this point, but from what I see and what I know and what I've learned, this is where we are. We're fighting for survival right now. That is what we are doing. And if we don't fight together, we will not survive. It is simple as that. We will have what you call climate migration. People would leave the Caribbean because there's about too much hurricane down there. We got a green card, we got America go live. We can't deal with them hurricane every year. We fix back my house gone. The house a leak. The government sends somebody to fix it, it leak again. These are the things that we'll have to be dealing with. For example, you see a lot of potholes in the road. The heavy rain that we have, shifting patterns, they just patch and do it again. They're going to be constant. The heat, the rain, going to be breaking down the asphalt in the road. Those are things that have to do with climate change as well. So I can link everything almost to climate change, because climate change is affecting everything. This is no excuse for anything at all. It is the truth and the fact. So I want to end it there and just say to the media, my last point is, help us to make the linkages. Help us to spread the news so that we can fight this together. We have created a framework and a blueprint. We have presented it to the United Nations, the first time in our history that anything was presented at the United Nations with respect to our VNR, voluntary report, which took place and led by our Minister of Energy in August, I think, of this year, was it? July of this year. We have asked 5C, CCRI, those are regional organizations that deals with climate and so forth, to help us to put this framework together. We asked professors from university. And so they're all CDB. All of us are involved so that we could have created a framework that really could work. And therefore, I'm asking the media to take a look at it and help us to break it down and help us to spread the message that climate change is real, it's affecting us, and it will get worse before it gets better. That is what the science actually. All right?
We are now nearing the end, but we'll take one last question and then we'll have the closing statement by the Minister of Environment and Climate Action.
Ian Richards of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. Just 3 quick questions in terms of, as Prime Minister, as you spoke about the importance of persons getting involved in helping to carry the message. Talk to us about the importance of the young persons who participated at COP28 and what techniques will be used to transfer the information, transfer the experiences, transfer the knowledge gain back to our local people here and getting them to be more active in the fight against climate change. Also, in terms of the Sir Arthur Lewis Memorial Lecture, the Oxford professor Ian Golden spoke about the fact that climate change really can be addressed by 20% of the world's top countries. Do you think, based on your participation, and we would have touched on it some, but that there is enough political will now that leaders across the world are firmly behind the fact that there needs to be something done to stop the climate crisis that is being experienced here, and realizing the importance that it does affect us, as in the SIDs, as opposed to their countries on a larger scale? And also in terms of the pavilion, the St. Kitts and Nevis pavilion that was there, can you tell us how that would have helped to amplify the message on the ground at COP and complement what was being done on the stage by the ministers and other officials who would have made presentations?
I think I would like to direct that to the young person who is here so that they can speak of their experience and how they intend. And the other one to the foreign minister when it comes to countries and the 20% that you spoke about and the political will from our foreign policy perspective. And then I think your last question, which was the third question, well, the 20% of the top country, pavilion, how the pavilion was actually instrumental in amplifying the voice of St. Kitts and Nevis. So I would say to the young person here to speak, and then pass it to the foreign minister, and then pass it back to the Honorable Dr. Joya Clark to speak about the pavilion perspective. So I don't know which, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that question. So all of us from the youth delegation, we have a year worth of plans that would include not only media appearances, but also other youth engagement. We would be looking at, we would be receiving sponsorship, so we will be able to assist with meaningful forums and engagements within that. Well, we're looking at a year, but of course these things have ripple effects, and so it's not just what we say now for now, but it actually continues. We'll also be looking at not just engaging youth groups, but also civil society organizations, as well as NGOs and community-based organizations, so that we can really cover and touch a lot of the general public and also our education systems.
I think from the experience that we've had in the COP last year in Egypt, and from the experience I've garnered from the COP this year, I think the very rich countries, part of the 20% that I understand our reporter to be saying, I believe that there is some will, definitely, to make a difference. Because what is the point of one part of the world being able to experience a better quality of life, and 80% of persons are not able to enjoy that? I believe that the conscience of the world has been raised. I think you were able to see the passion that was coming through. For example, in several platforms where you had people like former Vice President Kerry basically saying, you know, we have to get militant. I mean, this is a guy who wanted to become the President of the United States of America. And he said publicly, we got to get militant to ensure that the coal and so forth that is still being used for purposes of energy, that this has to come to an end. I make reference to that because he is supposed to be coming from the developed world, developed country that is the leading country in the world. And if he is able to speak with such passion, it tells you that the people who are at the top 20, as you would have mentioned, their consciences have been really raised. And I believe that eventually we will succeed. We, again, understand that it has to be diplomacy. A guy is not going to cut off his own hand and then he has to try to feed himself. Where are you going to get the hand from? So it has to be done in the way that I believe the world understands, the leaders understand. This is going to take time. In the meantime, as we raise people's consciousness, we are hoping that we would be able to survive at the end of the day. But it is happening, but it is taking time.
Right. On the matter of our country pavilion, which for me was the best space at COP 28, and this was confirmed by a number of passing delegates, like, this is the best pavilion. It was warm. It provided a space for collaboration. And we had many visitors passing through our pavilion, from Canada to the MRV hub to youth delegates from all over. And you know what it did for us? The pavilion allowed our youth delegates who are sponsored by the COP presidency, for example, Connor Griot, who was sponsored by the Youth Innovators Under 30 program. Imagine, from St. Kitts and Nevis, his project on Sargassum seaweed was one of the top 30 innovations globally. And he was sponsored by UNFFC, and he was on Spotlight at COP, and his home base was the St. Kitts Pavilion. Outside of that, the pavilion, just like we joined Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados, and CARICOM, they had pavilions. And the move now is for countries to really use this space as an exposition hub for what we offer in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we had our videos from tourism, our partnership with the Republic of China and Taiwan. We had the SDG videos. We had our investment conversations, our bilateral meetings. Girls Care Jamaica had a very intense conversation about young women and their participation in climate action. And out of that, Jazzy Connor, who is a mentee from the program, and I think, Tricia, you are one of our unofficial mentors, she got a big boost after that conversation on Yadi Hub, Jamaica. And so her voice, Global Yadi, her voice as a St. Kitts and Nevis youth delegate has been like tripled, amplified in the global Jamaican diaspora because of the space that we offered for partnership with our Girls Care program, our Global Fund for Women program, and of course, the hub brought together the pavilion brought together regional partners, SICRI, who's working very closely with the Ministry of Energy, CDB, who's dealing with geothermal. We had the Premier Brantley present his position from St. Kitts and Nevis in particular on geothermal, the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, and University of the West Indies in Professor Donovan Campbell. They joined us in our pavilion to have a very critical conversation on how St. Kitts and Nevis transitions to a sustainable island state and how we use energy, geothermal energy in particular, as the what's the word, the like the most central point of that transition. Nexus. So for me, the St. Kitts and Nevis Pavilion, that was a marketing space. That was a selling space. It was a convening space. And it was critical that we had that 20 square feet, well, I call it a real odd number of space to allow people to see what we have on offer. And I want to thank Chameleon Media and our partners who designed the St. Kitts Nevis Pavilion for us. We took all our resources from here and carried it to UAE so people could see that we have the strength and we have the skills here in St. Kitts and Nevis to present our island nation to the world. Thank you.
Okay. As we close, the clerk will give closing remarks. Okay, we'll hear closing remarks from Dr. Clark, the Minister of Environment, Climate Action. And
Before she closes, just let me say thanks as the Prime Minister, and I'll allow the Minister of Sustainable to close. Let me extend thanks as the Prime Minister on behalf of St. Kitts and Nevis to the University of the West Indies, CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, SICWI, 5Cs, Girls Care Jamaica, Global Fund for Women, UNFCCC, COP Presidency, Chameleon Media, which is also here, ROC, Republic of China, and Taiwan. I want to also thank the UAE for its excellent hosting of the event and to thank all those who participated. I want to especially thank the young people and the ministers, of course. So I take this opportunity to thank all who were involved or are involved, or some of our people are still there in making sure that this COP is a successful COP for St. Kitts and Nevis and the world in general. So thanks again to all. Minister.
Thank you, Prime Minister. That was so excellent. I need not say anything else, except I'll close with the words of one of our youth delegates, Connor O'Brien. In that conversation, he said to us, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis have hardship. And it's hard for us to tell them, think about climate change and climate action when you have to think about bread and butter. And the Ministry of Environment wants climate change to be a bread and butter issue. As the Minister of Energy outlined, every single person is affected. And our youth have recognized that their role is critical, their voices are most important, and our ministry will support them for the entire year and beyond. We must thank Ambassador Justin Hawley, who did the work of 10 persons in the last 12 days, and he's still doing it with our remaining delegation. It was a tremendous effort, a great partnership with Ambassador Hawley and the ministry in Dubai. We could not do it as a ministry without the support of the Foreign Minister, the Minister of Energy, and the Prime Minister. I am so grateful and thank you to our media partners. You are our champions. This message will go nowhere without you. So thank you for your efforts, and we look forward to collaborating.
All right, so with those profound, thought-provoking, action-provoking words, we are now at the end of the post-COP28 press conference. Good afternoon.
St. Kitts and Nevis.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
Initiative.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, and Caribbean Brewery.